Okay, on to chapter 6, and it's titled Unit of Consciousness, and the first section is regarded as consciousness, a unit. In studying the very varied manifestations of consciousness, we are apt to forget two important facts. First, that the consciousness of each man is a unit. However separate and different from each other its manifestations may appear to be. Let's say that again. First, that the consciousness of each man is a unit. However separate and different from each other its manifestations may appear to be. Secondly, that all these units themselves are parts of the consciousness of the logos and therefore react similarly under similar conditions. We cannot too often remind ourselves that consciousness is one, that all apparently separate consciousnesses are truly one, as one sea might pour through many holes in an embankment. And so we cannot too often remind ourselves that consciousness is one. And it's been said to us many times. I hear it quite often, and it's always a good reminder. Because, early on the path, I want to say it's easy to fall away from it first, here and there. That seawater might issue from the holes differently colored if the embankment were composed of differently colored earths, but it would be all the same seawater. Analyzed, it would all show the presence of the same characteristic salts. So are all consciousnesses from the same ocean of consciousness and have many essential identities. Veiled in the same kind of matter, they will act in the same kind of way and reveal their fundamental identity of nature. The individual consciousness appears to be a complexity instead of a unity when its manifestations are concerned. And modern psychology speaks of dual and treble and multiplex personality, losing sight of the fundamental unity among the confusion of the manifold. Yet truly is our consciousness a unit, and the variety is due to the materials in which it is working. The ordinary waking consciousness of a man is the consciousness working through the physical brain at a certain rate imposed by it, conditioned by all the conditions of that brain, limited by all its limitations, balked by the varying obstructions it offers, checked by a clot of blood, silenced by the decay of tissue. At every moment, the brain hinders its manifestations, while at the same time it is, on the physical plane, its only enabling instrument of manifestation. When the consciousness, turning its attention away from the external physical world, ignores the denser part of the physical brain and uses only the etheric portions thereof, its manifestations at once change in character. The creative imagination disports itself in etheric matter, and drawing on its accumulated contents, obtained from the external world by its denser servant, it arranges them, dissociates, and recombines them after its own fancies, and creates the lower worlds of dream. When it casts aside for a while its ethereal garment, turning its attention away completely from the physical world, and shedding its fetters of physical matter, it roams through the astral world at will, or drifts through it unconsciously, turning all its attention to its own contents, receiving many impacts from that astral world, which it ignores or accepts according to its stage of evolution or its humor of the moment. If it should manifest itself to an outside observer, as may happen in trance conditions, It shows powers so superior to those it manifested when imprisoned in the physical brain that such an observer, judging only by physical appearances, may well regard itself as a different consciousness. Still more is this the case when the astral body, being thrown into trance, the bird of heaven, shows itself soaring into loftier regions, and its splendid flight so enchants the observer that he deems it a new being, and no longer the same entity as crawled in the physical world. Yet truly is it ever one and the same. The differences are in the materials with which it is connected and through which it works, and not in itself. As to the second important fact stated above, man is not yet sufficiently developed to appreciate any evidence as to the unity of consciousness in its workings above the physical plane, but its unity on the physical plane is being demonstrated into unity of physical consciousness. Amid the immense varieties of the mineral, vegetable, animal, and human kingdoms, the underlying unity of physical consciousness has been lost sight of, and broad lines of cleavage have been set up which do not in reality exist. Life has been wholly denied to the mineral, grudged to the vegetable, and H.P. Blavatsky was ridiculed when she declared that one life, one consciousness, vivified all and informed all. Vivified and informed all. With every day, the identity between the animal and the physical man, between the plant and man, and even between the reptile and its nest, the rock, and man is more and more clearly shown. The physical and chemical constituents of all being found to be identical. Chemical science may well say that there is no difference between the matter which composes the ox and that which forms man. But the occult doctrine is far more explicit. It says not only the chemical compounds are the same, but the same infinitesimal invisible lives compose the atoms of the bodies of the mountain and the daisy, of the man and the ant, of the elephant and the tree which shelters it from the sun. Each particle, whether you call it organic or inorganic, is a life. If this be true, it should be possible to obtain from such living minerals, vegetables, animals, and men evidence of an identity of life, of sentiency, of response to stimuli, and while we may freely admit that we should expect to find gradations of sentiency, that as we ascend the ladder of life, we should expect the manifestations to become fuller and more complex, yet some definite manifestations of sentiency should be found in all who share one life. The evidence for this was lacking when H.P. Blavatsky wrote, "It is available now, and it is from an Eastern scientist whose rare ability has ensured his welcome in the West that the evidence appropriately comes." Professor Jagadish Chandra Bose of Calcutta has definitely proved that so-called inorganic matter is responsive to stimulus, and that the response is identical from metals, vegetables, animals, and so far as experiment can be made, man. He arranged apparatus to measure the stimulus applied and to show in curves traced on a revolving cylinder the response from the body receiving the stimulus. He then compared the curves obtained in tin and in other metals with those obtained from muscle, and found that the curves from the tin were identical with those from the muscle, and that other metals gave curves of like nature but varied in the period of recovery. So we're looking at, on this picture here, we have a series of electric responses to successive mechanical stimuli at intervals of half a minute in tin, and then mechanical responses in muscle. Tetanus, both complete and incomplete, due to repeated shocks, was caused and similar results accrued in mineral as in muscle. Fatigue was shown by metals, least of all by tin. Hold on, I have to look and see what this meaning, I want to see what this meaning of tetanus is. Tetanus, both complete and incomplete. Tetanus being an acute infectious disease caused by spores of the bacterium tetani, carried by muscle spasms in lockjaw, also called trismus. That's obviously an interesting thing to consider there. I'm not a scientist or microbiologist or anything. I don't know what that looks like under a microscope or something. What tetanus looks like. Interesting though. Fatigue was shown by metals, least of all by tin. Chemical reagents, such as drugs, produced similar results on metals with those known to result with animals exciting, depressing, and deadly. By deadly is meant resulting in the destruction of the power of response. A poison will kill a metal, inducing a condition of immobility, so that no response is obtainable. If the poisoned metal be taken in time, an antidote may save its life. A stimulant will increase response, and as large and small doses of a drug have been found to kill and stimulate respectively, so have they been found to act on metals. Among such phenomena, asks Professor Bose, how can we draw a line of demarcation and say, here the physical process ends, and there the physiological process ends? No such barrier exists. And here we're looking at some more tests where we have activity and non-response. A being incomplete, B being complete tetanus in tin, A being incomplete, and B being complete tetanus in muscle. And we're looking at, very similar responses to both tin and muscle. A normal response, B the effect of poison, it's down here, lower on this here. Revival by antidote, which would be, as we mentioned earlier, be stimulus, some stimulus. Very interesting. Professor Bose has carried on a similar series of experiments on plants and has obtained similar results. A fresh piece of cabbage stalk, a fresh leaf, or other vegetable body can be stimulated and will show similar curves. It can be fatigued, excited, depressed, or poisoned. There is something rather pathetic in seeing the way in which the tiny spot of light, which records the pulses in the plant, travels in ever weaker and weaker curves when the plant is under the influence of poison, falls into a final despairing straight line, and stops. The plant is dead. One feels as though a murder had been committed, as indeed it has. These admirable series of experiments have established on a definite basis of physical facts the teaching of occult science on the University of Life. Mr. Marcus Reed has made microscopical observations which show the presence of consciousness in the vegetable kingdom. He has observed symptoms of fright when tissue is injured, and further, he has seen that male and female cells floating in the sap become aware of each other's presence without contact. The circulation quickens, and they put out processes towards each other. More than 3 years after the publication of Professor Bose's experiments, some interesting confirmation of his observations arose in the course of M. Jean Becquerel's study of the N rays communicated by him to the Paris Academy of Sciences. Animals under chloroform cease to emit these rays, and they are never emitted by a corpse. Flowers formally emit them, but under chloroform, the emanation ceases. Metals also emit them, and under chloroform, the emanation again ceases. Thus, animals, flowers, and metals alike give out these rays, and alike cease to emanate them under the action of chloroform. And if that isn't a little bit interesting as to, the use of chloroform. The N rays are due to vibrations in the etheric double, causing waves in the surrounding ether. Chloroform expels the etheric double, and hence the waves cease. At death, the etheric double leaves the body, and the rays consequently can no longer be observed. So the meaning of physical consciousness. The term physical consciousness is used in two distinct senses, and it may be useful to pause a moment in order to define these. It is often used to indicate what is above termed ordinary waking consciousness, i.e. the consciousness of the man, of the Jiva Atma, or, if the phrase be preferred, of the monad working through the Jiva Atma and the lower triad of permanent atoms. It is also used in the sense in which it is used here as consciousness working in physical matter, receiving and responding to physical impacts, unconcerned with any transmission of impulses onward to the higher planes, or with any impulses sent to the physical body from those planes. In this more restricted and accurate sense, it would include any outthrillings from the atoms and molecules ensouled by the life of the third logos, be any outthrillings from the atoms and molecules ensouled by the life of the third logos, b. any similar outthrillings from organized forms ensouled by the life of the second logos, and c. any similar outthrillings from the life of the monad proceeding from the permanent atoms in which the sprua are not directly concerned. When the sprua are active, the ordinary waking consciousness is affected. For instance, ammonia sniffed up by the nose shows two results. There is a rapid secretion, that is the response of the cells in the olfactory tract. There is also a smell, that is the result of a vibration running up to the sense centers in the astral body, and there recognized in consciousness. The change in consciousness affects the first set of sprua in the atoms of the olfactory tract, and thus reaches the waking consciousness working in the physical brain. It is only through the sprua that changes in consciousness on the higher planes brings about changes in the waking consciousness. It must be remembered that as the solar system is a field for the evolution of all the developing consciousnesses within it, so are there smaller areas within it serving as smaller fields. Man is the microcosm of the universe, and his body serves as a field of evolution for myriads of consciousnesses less evolved than his own. Thus, the three activities mentioned above under A, B, and C are all present in his body, and all enter into the physical consciousness working therein. And this being outthrillings from the atoms and molecules ensouled by the life of the third logos, any similar outthrillings, organized forms ensouled by the life of the second logos, and any similar outthrillings from the life of the monad proceeding from the permanent atoms in which the sprua are not directly concerned. Thus, the three activities mentioned there are all present in his body, and all enter into the physical consciousness working therein. That in which the atomic sprua are concerned does not enter it. that belongs to the conscious. I'm going to have to look this up on page 96 here. Does not enter it. That belongs to the consciousness of the Jiva Atma. The workings of the physical consciousness do not now directly affect the waking consciousness in the higher animals or in man. They affected it in the earlier parts of the embryonic life in the group soul, while the consciousness in the second logos was mothering the dawning consciousness derived from it. But physical consciousness has now sunk below the threshold of consciousness, while showing itself as the memory of the cell, as the selective action in glands and papillae, I don't know if I'm saying that right, and generally in the carrying on of functions necessary for the support of bodies. It is the lowest activity of consciousness, and as consciousness functioned more and more actively on the higher plane, its lowest workings no longer attract its attention, and they become what we call automatic. So it's like this, it's a sliding scale, right? We're shifting, it's a shift. And it all moves together, it seems, right? So now it is physical consciousness that is appealed to in Professor Bose's experiments, and it is the response of this consciousness in the tin and in the animal that is the same and is shown in the pulse indicated by the curves. The animal will feel the stimulus, while the tin will not. That is the result of the additional workings of the consciousness in astral matter. We may thus allege that consciousness working in physical matter responds to various kinds of stimulation, and that the response is the same whether it be obtained from mineral, vegetable, or animal. The consciousness shows the same characteristic workings is the same. The difference which, as already said, we observed as we ascend, lie in the improvement of the physical apparatus, an apparatus which enables astral and mental, not physical, activities of consciousness to manifest themselves on the physical plane. Men and animals feel and think better than minerals and vegetables because their more highly evolved consciousness has shaped for itself on the physical plane this much improved apparatus. But even so, our bodies answer as the lower bodies answer to the same stimuli, and this purely physical consciousness is the same in all. Now, in the mineral, the astral matter connected with the permanent astral atom is so little active, and consciousness is sleeping so deeply therein, that there is no perceptible working from the astral to the physical. In the higher plants, there seems to be a sort of foreshadowing of a nervous system, but it is too little developed and organized to serve anything but the simplest purposes. The added activity on the astral plane improves the astral sheath in connection with the plant, and the vibrations of the astral sheath affect the etheric portion of the plant and thus its denser matter. Hence the foreshadowing of a nervous system above alluded to. When we come to the animal stage, the much greater activity of the consciousness on the astral plane causes more powerful vibrations, which pass to the etheric double of the animal, and by the etheric vibrations thus caused, the nervous system is builded. The shaping of it is due to the logos through the group soul, and the active assistance of the shining ones of the third elemental kingdom, directing the work of the ethereal nature spirits. But the impulse comes from the consciousness on the astral plane working in the permanent atom, and the sheath of the astral matter attracted by it, roused to activity by the group soul. As the first very simple apparatus is formed, more delicate impacts from without can be perceived, and these impacts also help in the evolution. Action and reaction succeed each other, and the mechanism continually proves in receptive and transmitting ability. Consciousness does not do much building on the astral plane at this stage, and works there in an unorganized sheath The organizing is done on the physical plane by the efforts of consciousness to express itself, dim and vaguely groping as these efforts are aided and directed by the group soul and the shining ones. This work has to be completed to a greater extent before the third life wave pours down, for animal man has evolved with his brain and nervous system before that great outpouring comes, which gives the Jiva Atman a working body and makes possible the higher evolution of man. We have to admit that that is some deep stuff. We read it again, we absorbed it. I'm not trying to understand it right now. We're just putting it in, and we're going, we're basically invoking the understanding, and it will come at some point. So with that being said, we're going to leave it there, and we will pick up with the mechanism of consciousness and the development of the mechanism tomorrow, and that should be also very interesting. All right, have a good one.